Hey everyone, welcome to today's report. It is TowerGate, day 30, April the 2nd, 2017, Sunday. Alrighty, well, I just got through watching a lot of the Sunday morning programs. Doesn't seem like they want to talk too much about the recent events this week with Nunes going over and taking a look at those logs and learning, as we did in the last day or so, that Nunes now knows the name of the individual, at least one of the individuals who unmasked the conversations between Trump and his team. They're saying, is being reported on Fox News, that person's a high level intelligence official. Everybody would know his name, and he's not from the FBI. So I think that you're going to see a lot of questions this week by probably more on the right. I don't think we'll see much out of CNN and MSNBC. They realize now that there's some serious issues, probably some serious evidence, and so they are going to do everything they can not to talk about that. So that should be interesting. They're going to try to stay totally focused on Trump, Russia, and this whole narrative, which is a failing narrative. Day by day, the air comes out of that narrative. But giving it some thought last night, you know, when you look at the definition that Fox is giving us of who this individual is, it seems to me that there's about a 90% chance it's got to be one of two people. It's either got to be John Brennan, head of the CIA, whom I have suggested all throughout. He is a Clinton confidant. He's part of the Clinton inner circle. He is the head of the CIA, and we all know what type of things that they like to involve themselves in, and the mischief that they get themselves involved in, and political operations and things like that. So I think that John Brennan is probably a very likely suspect as to who was the one who unmasked these conversations. And of course, he will be questioned in front of the House Intelligence Committee. I assume the Senate committee as well. But there's another person who we should not forget about, who also has access to all these informations and who is over about 12, 13 different agencies, including the Secret Service. And that will be Department of Homeland Security guy Jay Johnson. Now keep in mind, Jay Johnson, he comes out of the Obama group, out of the Obama inner circle. And of course, we know that he's a card-carrying member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He actually pays a membership. He supports all types of these Muslim activities in the U.S. There's about 20 different organizations that he supports. These are generally watched pretty closely by the intelligence community, so it's kind of strange that that Jay Johnson, being head of the DHS, or at least was head of the DHS, that he would be this Muslim convert. But I don't like Jay Johnson a whole lot, obviously. He seems like he's got a very anti-American bent. He's a pro-immigration, pro-everything on the left, which is why he was Obama's appointee. So Jay Johnson, and he's a very political guy. So I think that it's very likely that we're going to find out as we ask more and more questions, and as we finally get down to it. I would not be surprised to see that one of the two individuals, or that the individual who unmasks the conversations between Trump and his team, very well could have been Jay Johnson. So I would say it's down to John Brennan and Jay Johnson. If you're talking about officials people would know, very high level intelligence. Could be Clapper, but I just don't think Clapper's that stupid. He knew he was going to be leaving. It's hard to cover up your tracks like that. So maybe Clapper's not that smart. I don't know. He's probably the third option, but I would say Brennan, Jay Johnson, possibly Clapper, based on the description that Fox News is giving us. But no one was interested in talking about that on the Sunday morning shows. Fox News spent most of their time talking about Chris Wallace, of course, most of his time on the healthcare agenda and the budget and the processes that are going on. He didn't want to talk much about those things. So it appears that we didn't make much progress on that today, but I expect as the week moves forward, particularly we'll see from like Sean Hannity and others, say on the right, we'll see them wanting to dig and dig and dig and try to find out what the source is, who it is that Nunes has determined is the person who did, or at least one of the people who did unmask those conversations. So that is that's where that stands today. That's really the only thing that happened today regarding TowerGate, other than one other very interesting development. As you know, from the past 2 or 3 weeks ago, we learned that one of the FISA warrants was a warrant to spy on a server at Trump Tower, because this server had been pinging. That's a computer term meaning one computer trying to speak to another computer. So it appears that the reason was that supposedly this computer in Trump Tower was being pinged by a server for a Russian bank called Alpha Bank. Now, Alpha Bank recently has come out and stated that they are now making the claim that they were not responsible for sending those pings, that essentially some third party, which they believe originated in the United States, essentially hacked into their server or made it look like that the pings were actually coming from Alpha Bank, when in fact they were not. So now Alpha Bank, along with the Russian parliament, the Russian government, have now made it known to the American Department of Justice that they are going to send over these Russian officials with the logs and with the proof that they were hacked 3 times back in the late winter, early spring of 2016. They are going to provide documentation from their IT experts that show that those pings did not originate from Alpha Bank, but they were rather disguised, and that those pings came from somewhere inside the United States. So it kind of fits into this narrative that we learned from WikiLeaks, that it is possible for, and this is kind of backed up by some of what CrowdStrike is now saying, as they're backing away from their findings that it was the Russians. They're now saying it is possible that an intelligence community in the United States could have pinged the server at Trump Tower and made it look like it was coming from Alpha Bank in Russia. So apparently the Russians, which this is unprecedented, this is the Russian government, along with some Russian intelligence experts, who are willing to turn over logs and documents to make their case that the pings were not coming from Alpha Bank, but were coming from a third party from another location, which they believe is the United States. They want the American Department of Justice to take a look at their findings, to talk to their people, and consider that this may have been the case. So they want to join in on this investigation. And keep in mind, when you can, if the Russians can prove that this is correct, and that that server from Alpha Bank in Russia was not the source of the original ping, but rather it was hijacked or piggybacked upon to make it look like it was sending those, that would go a long way to disputing the Russian narrative. The fact that you have CrowdStrike, which is the group who did the forensic analysis on the server for the DNC servers, they are now backing away and now saying that they're not so sure that their findings were correct, that it was the Russians that hacked the DNC. Keep in mind, the FBI was never allowed by the DNC to do an investigation on those servers. So the FBI was going totally on CrowdStrike. So it's CrowdStrike and the pings on this server that are really the entire Russia did it case. The entire narrative is based on these things, and both of these things we're now finding are coming into question. And it looks like that the Russians have no problem with meeting with Department of Justice officials here in the United States, showing them the evidence, and working with them to help resolve this situation. Because quite honestly, the Russians are tired of being bashed. And the parliament met this past week to begin discussions about making probably some sort of a joint statement from the Russian government. Putin has personally denied this as well. Julian Assange has stated that the Russians were not the source of the DNC leaks. So the entire Russian narrative is falling apart right in front of our very eyes. At the same time, we are getting intelligence officials, obviously, not so much officials as much as individuals within the intelligence community who are now coming forward, going directly to Nunes and possibly the president and his administration to make them aware of the types of activities that were going on that appear to be totally political and had nothing to do with collecting intelligence, even if you do buy into the Russian narrative. So the entire thing is unraveling. Maybe that's why they didn't want to talk much about it this morning on the Sunday morning programs, is because they realize it's unraveling. The only option that they have, they're totally locked into this Russian narrative, and the only thing they can do is continue to hold the line on the Russian narrative and hope it doesn't fall apart. But it is falling apart, and it's becoming pretty obvious. And as far as the hearings, as far as investigating Trump and Russia and people around Trump and their connections, there's just not anything there. There's no there. We know that the FBI hasn't turned up anything. We know that both the heads of the CIA and the NSA have stated that they found no evidence of that. The only thing that we're finding evidence of is that someone within the Obama administration, officials, maybe intelligence, maybe Loretta Lynch, Justice, but clearly there is an organized campaign that has been going on for some time to delegitimize Trump, to do damage to Trump, to embarrass Trump, to first prevent him from being able to win the presidency, and now to discredit him and try to maybe force impeachment hearings, or at least ways muddy the water, create controversy, handcuff him, keep him from being able to act, and especially in the area of foreign policy as it deals with Russia. They're making it very difficult. If Trump now tries to reach out to Russia, tries to work with Russia, and tries to improve relations, it will almost play into the narrative. This is why I know that there's intelligence going on along with probably the Clintons and the Obamas. This is a very large political operation that's been going on since 2016. I do believe it will be exposed. How far down the rabbit hole they go and how much they expose, I don't know. A lot of times these things will just go to a certain point, get certain individuals caught up in the net, and then they put it to bed. So we'll see how far this goes, or if the entire thing unravels. So that's basically what's going on the TowerGate. On a kind of a non-related issue, we had, of course, Farkas. As I said yesterday, she should not have gone back on TV and tried to walk back what she said. But now she's taken it one step farther. She actually was on MSNBC, and she's now suggesting that everybody talking about her revelations is fake news, and probably the Russians are behind it. So apparently she's being coached as well to stay on this narrative. It's really all they have, but it's just humorous because, you know, those words are the words that she said. We have her on video. There was no editing done. That was a live broadcast. It wasn't, she didn't go do an interview, have it recorded, and have it rebroadcast later with editing. It was a live broadcast. We all saw what she said, heard what she said, and know what she meant. So her attempts to walk this back did not work. And now her attempts to blame Russia and describe this as fake news only shows you that she too, she's probably pretty scared right now. She knows she's going to have to lawyer up. And writing that narrative that is a dying, failing narrative is not going to do her any good whatsoever. And I expect we'll be hearing more from Ms. Farkas, or Mrs. Farkas, or whoever she may be. Okay, so that's basically what has happened today in the last 24 hours of TowerGate 2017, day 30. Two other very brief things I'll mention, just generally not necessarily part of TowerGate, but two things to be particularly paying attention to that did happen in the past 24 hours that, again, have not really received very much airtime this morning on the news programs, although quite a bit of press media covered it yesterday. First, we had the arrest of someone named Candace Claiborne. Candace Claiborne. She worked at the U.S. State Department. Let's see. She was picked up or arrested because she has been found lying to the FBI regarding counterintelligence operations and regarding China. I looked at the FBI arrest warrant, It's very lengthy. There's about 36 cited specific dates and amounts of money and gifts that she received. And apparently what Miss Claiborne was doing, working with another person who they will only call the subject. This is a male individual who lives on the West Coast, who operates an import-export business. It appears he may be Asian. That her and this gentleman together were working a little bit of a plan. And apparently what she was doing was she was giving information to China in exchange for money and gifts. And what she was disclosing to them was very damaging. She was giving them, and has been giving them for quite some time, our strategy for how to deal with China on various issues. So she's been giving them our strategy. Now, when you give your adversary your strategy, you're giving them everything. So now it becomes a little bit more obvious and a little bit more easy to understand why China, in the last year and a half or 2 years of the Obama administration, why they treated him like they did. If you remember the episode where he went to China and they didn't roll out the steps of the airplane and the red carpet for him. Oh, they did it for the leader of the Philippines. They did it for the Russians. They did it for the Venezuelans and all the others who came there. But they left Obama sitting out there on Air Force One on the tarmac, and they made him roll out the service steps and exit the rear of the airplane. And then they got into an argument with some Chinese security people when they got off the plane because they were crying about it. Any other American president would have said, "Wheels up, we're going back home." Not Obama. And of course, we've seen how China has played the U.S. in foreign policy and quite a few different issues over the last 2 years. And now we know why. It's because Candace Claiborne was giving them the strategy that we were using to deal with them. If you give away your strategy, it makes you pretty ineffective, doesn't it? So Mrs. Claiborne, of course, was a part of the, she comes out of the Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and the Clinton inner circle. She was part of Hillary Clinton's State Department. And of course, once Hillary left, John Kerry. So Hillary Clinton and John Kerry's State Department attaché here, Candace Claiborne, is now under arrest for lying to the FBI regarding a counterintelligence operation in China. And she is going to be facing some serious jail time. She's pled not guilty. Next up, and finally, we learned that Katie Walsh was fired or transferred, depending on how you want to look at it. The story's being covered 2 different ways. As we know, several weeks back, we started hearing her name pop up. She was worked under Reince Priebus when he was head of the RNC. She was his right-hand woman. When he came to work for Trump, he brought Katie Walsh with him. It had been believed for the past several weeks that she may be the leaker because she has a close relationship with a journalist. And so a lot of people believe that Katie Walsh was the person who was leaking a lot of the stuff out of the Trump administration. So she was serving as deputy chief of staff, by the way, so under Reince Priebus. So it looks like she has been, depending on how you want to look at it, one group of people say, okay, she was fired and she's gone, which is true. She's no longer serving as deputy chief of staff, no longer inside the White House. She is apparently has been moved back to the RNC, where she is going to be going back to pretty much what she used to do, working within the RNC. She's now out of the loop in the White House, out of the administration. Now, the Trump administration spokespeople, Bannon and Spicer and all these people, and I think even Trump himself, have not come out and said, yeah, we fired her, she was the leaker. They basically come out and said, yeah, well, we thought that she could be more effective at the RNC, working to keep the party and the delegates and all those people on board and united with the agenda, which they say she supports. So they have some people saying, yeah, she was just fired outright, she was the leaker, and other people saying, no, she just got moved because we think she could be more effective somewhere else. But however you want to look at that, Katie Walsh, the person who was suspected by quite a few people, has now been fired. She was apparently relieved of her security badge yesterday, her cell phone confiscated, her computer confiscated. I imagine they'll go through that and go through those devices and find out what's there. So Katie Walsh is out. So these are basically the major events that have broken in the last 24 hours. As I suspect, in this coming week, we are going to see the right wing or independent media going to be digging very hard to find out who this individual is that Noon has identified as being the person who unmasked the communications. I believe it was either Jay Johnson or John Brennan, with the outside shot that it was Clapper, and that's really about all we have today. So kind of a slow day today, but I expect that tomorrow it'll fire right back up again. Be interesting to see how hard they press Sean Spicer for this information, and it'll be very interesting to see how the Justice Department responds to the Russian request to work with them to try to clear the Russians and Alpha Bank of being involved in any way with the Russian conspiracy with Trump and his administration. So the walls are closing in, the bottom's dropping out, the air is going out of the sails. The illusion is being revealed to be nothing more than a propaganda campaign, a political campaign against the Trump administration. If this all plays out and this all eventually gets emptied out, there's going to be a lot of fallout for this. It's going to be devastating. You're going to have a lot of people going to jail, including high-end people, and it's going to destroy the Democratic Party for probably a decade. This will take a very long time to recover from. So anyway, I think that we're moving in that direction, and I'll be back tomorrow with another video. It will be day 31, and we'll find out what tomorrow brings in TowerGate 2017. Y'all have a good day. See ya.